We need John, Kate, Chris, Robert. Oops, I picked the wrong one. Is everybody here that we need?
I believe so, Your Honor.
All right. I think this is 003-86307-2019, State of Texas versus Robert Hunter Wagner. And we're here on a defense motion to suppress. And I'm assuming it's a warrantless stop and arrest. So the state will have the burden, right?
That's correct, Your Honor.
Okay. And I have watched about 12 minutes or 10 minutes of the video that I was told to watch, okay? The state needs to make an opening statement and call your first witness.
Your Honor, the state will waive open and calls Officer Julian Adams.
Okay. If you would raise your right hand and be sworn. You swear or affirm testimony about to give be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, I do.
Good morning, Officer Adams. Can you state and spell your name for the court?
Yeah, my name's Julian Adams, Julian. Last name is Adames. I'm an investigator with the Allen Police Department.
All right, Investigator Adams, are you a certified peace officer?
Yes, I am.
And how long have you been a certified peace officer?
Since 2005.
I'll stipulate to his qualifications.
Okay.
So where are you currently employed?
With the Allen Police Department?
And on February 3rd, 2019, were you employed with the Allen Police Department?
Yes, I was.
Do you remember on that day what shift you were working?
I was working during the day shift.
And on that day, do you remember having an interaction with the defendant, Robert Wagner?
Yes, I do.
Do you remember the area? Do you remember the area that you were in, or the address where you had this interaction?
I do. It was, let's see here, 754 Mission Court.
What were you doing in that area when you saw the defendant?
Just general patrol. It was, we had been given information by our sergeant earlier in the week that we
Objection, non-response.
Thank you.
Um,
Another question.
when you were in that area, was there a certain purpose for you to be patrolling in that area that day?
Absolutely. We were given information by our sergeant earlier in the week that there had been some construction thefts and just general thefts in the area. That's a construction area, new housing development.
And while you were patrolling this area, did you see the defendant?
Yes.
What did you do once you saw him?
Well, I saw him there was a white truck parked in a house for sale, and I saw the defendant walking towards the person's front door. When he saw me, he started walking towards his truck. So I just turned around and I ended up doing a the vehicle was parked, so basically just an investigation to see what was going on.
Can you describe the truck? The color, what was in it, stuff like that?
It was a white truck. There was it looked like some irrigation. There was a bunch of stuff in the bed of the truck, but it looked like some irrigation equipment.
And was the defendant alone?
No, he had a person with him in the passenger side.
Okay. And so, did you record this incident?
It was recorded on the department body cam and then the department vehicle dash.
Were you able to view that camera footage before today?
I was.
Is it fairly inaccurately depict the scene as you remember it?
It does. Yes.
Were there any material alterations or deletions to the footage?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Your Honor,
Objection to the video.
You say no objections to the video?
That's correct, Your Honor.
Video's admitted.
all right. Your Honor, do you want me to play it and share my screen, or how do you like to do this?
I already watched it.
Okay, so we don't need to play it again for you?
Mm-mm.
All right. So if you remember, Officer Adams, and when you first approached the defendant, do you remember what the purpose they told you they were there for?
They said they were there. They had arranged, to summarize what he said, arranged to pick up some furniture or something on a for sale website, like Craigslist or one of those sites.
Do you remember the defendant showing you his phone?
I do, yes.
Do you remember what was on the phone?
I believe there was an address at like kind of Google Maps or Maps, and there was an address, and where they were supposed to be wasn't where they were at.
So the address they were showing you was not near where you guys were?
No, not at all.
Okay. When in this first interaction, as you walked up to the vehicle, did you see, hear, smell anything that was out of the ordinary?
When I walked up to, just besides what I've already explained about the vehicle and them parked there and him walking up to the house, when I walked up, I smelled the odor of marijuana.
Okay. So as you walked up, do you remember after asking for his license, do you remember his response?
I believe he doesn't have a license. And so I had needed to get his information and look him up in our system.
Is that the standing operating procedure if you have someone behind the wheel of a vehicle that doesn't have a license?
Absolutely, yes.
So in the video, do you remember asking the passenger if he was armed?
Well, he informed me he was armed. I don't remember if I asked him or not, but I remember him saying he was armed.
Okay. Do you remember him handing you a document that would prompt that question?
Yes.
Do you know what that document was?
I believe it was his driver's license that had his CHL on it.
When a defendant or a passenger informs you that they're armed, does this change your methodology?
It does. I mean, they're supposed to notify us that they're armed, and we appreciate it. No one likes any surprises.
Does it change your behavior during the interaction?
I mean, I would say just knowing that there's possibly a gun in there, but you're always under the assumption there may be a weapon in the car. That's why we ask.
Did you ask the defendant about his criminal history?
I did, yes.
Do you remember his response?
He had told me he had some history, and one of the things was an assault public servant.
Did that change your behavior during this interaction?
That definitely changes, because if someone has a history of violent behavior, especially towards the police, yeah, that changes their behavior.
So do you remember what you did after that exchange?
Yeah, I ended up going back to my my car and ended up checking him and basically verifying that he had some sort of government issued ID out of the state of Texas. And then I requested a cover officer based on my conversation and knowing what I had.
And then do you remember walking back up to the vehicle?
Yes.
As you did, do you remember what the defendant said to you as it was kind of an interaction of you asking him to exit the vehicle? Do you remember his response?
Yeah, he exited the vehicle, and a cover officer at that time had arrived, Officer Olander, and He exited the vehicle, and I just told him, I'm going to do a pat down, make sure you don't have any weapons. Did a pat down. While I was doing a pat down, I asked him if there was anything in the vehicle I needed to be aware of, and he said that there was a blunt in the ashtray. I asked him whose blunt it was. He claimed ownership, that it was his, and that was basically the extent of our conversation.
Are you sure he said blunt? If you need to refresh your memory, you can use the police report.
He said roach blunt. I mean,
Is that a colloquial term?
yeah. I mean, what do you mean by colloquial? Like you mean?
Are you familiar with a roach?
I don't know it either, officer.
Do you know what would a roach? What did that mean to you?
A roach means usually like a blunt, a cigar blunt, or something that has marijuana in it. People will cut it, lace it with marijuana, seal it, smoke it.
Have you heard roach used in that context to mean anything else?
Mm-hmm.
What else?
Well, I mean, obviously the insect, but.
Okay. So after he said he had this roach, what did you do with the defendant?
After he said, I just had Officer Olander escort him to the sidewalk, did a pat down for weapons of his brother, set his brother, and then I had then began a search of the car.
Okay, so at this point, you believe that there was evidence of a crime that had happened or would happen?
Well, I mean, yeah, by his own admission, he told me that there was a roach in the car.
Okay, and then you searched the vehicle?
Mm-hmm.
What did you find when you searched?
There was just like a little cigar in the car, and when I smelled, it smelled like burnt odor of marijuana.
Okay, I'll pass the witness.
Any questions?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed, sir?
Yes.
It's Officer Adams. Is that, I'm apologize, Investigator Adams. Is that correct, sir?
Yeah, and I was an officer at the time, but I'm currently investigator, but yeah, I appreciate that.
Congratulations on your promotion, sir.
Thank you.
It's my understanding that you were working the day shift. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And what time is that day shift?
From 5 a.m. to 5 p.m.
And this interaction with Mr. Wagner occurred on or about February 3rd of 2019. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And I believe that this time was about 1550 hours, and that would be 3:50 in the afternoon, correct?
I have in my report 1527, but I mean,
Okay.
we're looking at a half hour, so let's say 1500.
1527. I apologize. 1527, and it was daylight on that day. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
It was a bluebird day, right?
I don't know what your definition of bluebird is, but
Skies were blue, sun was out.
yeah, it was definitely better times back then.
Yeah. And you had an opportunity to watch the video. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And it's my understanding that you were on general patrol and you were patrolling the area around 754 Mission Court. Is that right?
That is correct.
And the area 754 Mission Court was on a cul-de-sac. Is that right?
That is correct.
And during that period of time, these look like a fully developed neighborhood. Is that correct?
Well, no, there's a construction area. There's houses that are still being built in that neighborhood.
Okay.
So
But all the houses we see on the video are fully constructed.
Yes.
Okay. And so as you are driving the neighborhood on routine general patrol, which you do every day as a patrol officer at the time before you're an investigator with Allen PD, isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that is part of your daily job. Is that right?
It is.
And even though that's your daily job of doing general patrol, you obviously, when you interact with people or you're conducting an investigation, you still have to follow issues that you were taught in the academy about reasonable suspicion, probable cause, and things of that nature, correct?
Yes.
All right. So it's my understanding, based on your testimony, at 754 Mission Court, you see I believe, a silver Chevy pickup with temporary tags. Is that correct?
I want to say it was white, but we're splitting hairs here.
I don't want to split hairs. we'll go with you. It's a white. I may not, my eyes aren't as good as they used to be. A white Chevy pickup with temporary tags. Is that correct?
Yes,
And that white Chevy pickup was legally parked, was it not?
it was parked in front of the house. Yes, it
He-
wasn't. I mean, if we're going to get statistical,
Was
say
it legal? Was it legally parked, sir?
well, it wasn't 18 inches from the curb if we're going to get statistical, but it was kind of parked. I mean, it was parked in front of the house. It wasn't moving, if that's what you're
Well,
getting at.
let's get statistical. Take an opportunity to review your offense report. You didn't indicate that to be an offense at the time, did you, sir?
No, no.
Okay, thank you very much. So when you see him, you see a gentleman that walks to the door. Is that correct?
Yes,
And this is a house that has a for sale sign on it, correct?
yes, that's correct.
And they have irrigation equipment in the bed of the truck. Is that correct?
Yes,
Now, in your general patrol, and just as a human individual, not as an officer, when someone has a for sale sign on a house, it is not uncommon for people to walk up to the house, is it, sir?
no, I would say it's not uncommon to walk up to the house.
And it is not a criminal offense to walk up to a house, is it, sir, with a for sale sign?
No, not at all.
And when you saw him walk up to the house, did he have any utensils on him that could be used for the burglary?
Not to my knowledge at that time, no.
Okay. And when you saw him walking from the house, was he carrying anything?
No, he was not.
Okay. And as you said, this was a construction area, correct?
Yes,
And when we're in a construction area, it is not uncommon to see vehicles like we had here with irrigation equipment in the back working on new construction homes, is it, sir?
no, it's not.
And we know that when they saw you, they didn't try to flee the area, did they, sir?
No, they didn't.
And when you approached them and as you were in your car, did you see any criminal activity occurring?
No, I did not see any criminal activity.
Were you directed to 754 Mission Court because of a reported criminal activity?
No,
Had you ever arrested anybody at 754 Mission Court before?
no, I had not.
What criminal activity had Mr. Wagner committed prior to your interaction with him?
No criminal activity, just based on my observations as a police officer.
And what criminal activity was being committed at the time before you made interaction with him?
There's no criminal activity, but there is suspicious behavior, which is a reason for us to make contact.
In the suspicious behavior we went through, you indicated it was not uncommon to see vehicles parked at homes that have for sale signs, correct?
That's correct.
The vehicle didn't flee or attempt to flee the area when you arrived, correct?
That's correct.
And it is not uncommon, as you said, in this newly constructed area to see people that do construction at homes, is it, sir?
No, that's not uncommon. But
Matter of fact,
you're at, well,
non-responsive, sir.
Can I ask
Matter of fact, during your interaction at this stop, we also have another person that pulls up to look at the house, don't we, sir?
he's a real estate agent, yes.
You didn't know that at the time until you identified him.
Well, I talked to him. He came up and I asked him because as part of my investigation, I'm trying to figure out, are you meeting this guy here? Are you the homeowner? There's a for sale sign. There's no one out in the front yard. The gentleman was leaving from the front door. So I'm trying, the totality of the circumstances, trying to figure out what is going on here. This
Well,
person,
we already know based on your testimony, the totality of circumstances is this. There was not a criminal offense afoot and you didn't see him commit any criminal offense, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, everything was captured via your body cam and dash cam, and that's into evidence as that we agreed to. and you've had an opportunity to review that. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And you indicate on your video, you get out of your car, and within 50 seconds after you get his license, you say to him, if everything checks out, I will let you go.
Mhm.
You recall hearing yourself say that?
Yeah, I recall hearing that.
Okay. So again, I go back. We know based on your own testimony that there was no criminal offense afoot and no criminal offense had occurred, correct?
That's correct at the time. Now, when I walked up, as I said in the report, though, and you're omitting this, I did smell marijuana. I'm building my case. I don't know what I have.
All right. Well, let's talk about the odor of marijuana.
Mhm.
At no point in time on the video, from the time it starts until you ask him to step out of the vehicle at 10:22, you never indicated the odor of weed.
Why would I?
And let's, for that matter, prior to you even getting out of your car where you acknowledged there was no criminal offense occurring or no criminal offense afoot, you didn't smell marijuana at that time, did you, sir?
When I first approached the vehicles, when I smelled the marijuana.
Before you got out of your car, did you smell marijuana?
Well, how could I?
Goes to my standard question. Before you got out of the car, was there criminal offense occurring or were criminal offense afoot?
No, just
Okay.
like I said.
So at 50 seconds into this video, and at no point in time did you ever indicate on the video that you smelled the odor of marijuana, did you, sir?
Not audible through the, it's not like I said, hey, I smell marijuana. I mean, we don't do that. Why would I do that?
Well, I've seen many officers in your profession that go, is there something going on? I smell marijuana in your car. At no point in time did you ever indicate you indicated or smelled the odor of marijuana, did you, sir?
Not in the audio recording, no.
Okay. And so you get out of your car, you have him get out, you say that you're going to check him out, and you asked if he ever been arrested for anything
Yes.
at 1:39 on the video. And at this point in time, does that matter to the purpose of your stop?
I mean, it's a common question why we ask people. I mean, like I said, you're conducting an investigation. It's from beginning to end. So
because there was no criminal offense occurring prior to you making contact with them, correct?
Well, we still have the right to go up and someone and talk to him.
You still have to have reasonable suspicion as well.
Well, I did. Like I said, he's walking up. We have an area that we've had thefts. It's an older truck with a bunch of stuff in the back of it. He goes and knocks on the door. As soon as he sees me, he walks back to the door. That's suspicious behavior to me. I mean, I've been a police officer for 15 years. I can tell you that's suspicious behavior.
Okay. Well, next time I go house shopping, I'll be very careful when I walk back from a house I'm looking at. So in sum and substance, and summarizing this, officer, when you saw this vehicle, there was nothing illegal occurring, correct?
No.
And when you saw him, there was nothing illegal that he was carrying or he was doing, was there?
No.
And they didn't try to run from you?
No.
Okay. Officer, thank you very much.
Anything else from the state?
Nothing else from the state, Your Honor.
Is this witness released?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you're free to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys.
Call your next witness.
State rest, Your Honor.
Does defense have any witnesses?
Defense rests.
Both sides close.
Close.
Any arguments?
The state will reserve for rebuttal.
Your Honor, may I proceed?
Yes.
Your Honor, this case is clearly a case that the officer didn't have reasonable suspicion to make contact. And I provided the court a number of cases, and I'd like to summarize those. In the first case, State v. Garcia, Cantu, this is a case in where two individuals were in a car at night, and the officer made encounters with them to see what they were doing. where they were legally parked and they had done nothing wrong. That in itself does not create reasonable suspicion. Provided the court another case, and that is Newbrow v. State. In this case, a law enforcement officer saw an SUV drive down a dirt road that was usually frequented only by oil field workers in a non-oil field type truck. The court ruled the reasonable suspicion requires more than a suspicious location of the vehicle at that time of day. In Ford v. State, and this is what we have here, we have a law enforcement officer that is developing his own personal opinion, and his personal opinion doesn't effectively substitute for specific articulable facts in supporting reasonable suspicion. His basis for the encounter, as the court heard, was that there had been thefts in the area because it was a construction zone. And we heard from the officer his own testimony that it was not uncommon for people to be parked in front of homes for sale. It was not uncommon for people to be in work trucks in a newly constructed area. That in itself is not enough, and he was giving his personal opinion, whether he has 15 years or 5 years. And another case I provided the court was Canales v. State. Sitting in a parking lot of convenience store in a high crime area is not enough for reasonable suspicion. I think the cases that I have provided the court illuminate the fact that Officer Adams did not have the requisite reasonable suspicion to even have the encounter with Mr. Wagner. And last case I would provide the court is Davis v. State. And this is a case where I believe a bunch of young black men were in the front yard of a home around midnight, and they saw people, an individual making suspicious movements and going back and forth. And it lays out what, in this case, how the officer's interaction with the gentleman was not reasonable suspicion for the following reasons. And that was, there was no evidence that the defendant attempted to flee. That is exactly what we have here. There's no evidence they attempted to flee. Did law enforcement see any criminal activity? In this case, Officer Adams indicated that he did not see any criminal activity that occurred or was ongoing. Third, was there any evidence that law enforcement was directed to the area because of reported criminal activity? Specifically, in this case, he was not called to this area because of reported criminal activity. Fourth, had law enforcement ever arrested anyone at this location? In this case, the officer indicated that he had never arrested anyone at this location. And lastly, Officer Adams, whether good officer, whether 15 years or 5 years, at no point in time made specific articulable facts to indicate what criminal activity had or was being committed. With this, Your Honor, we requestfully request that the court grant our motion to suppress. The state has failed through their witness and their testimony to establish that Officer Adams had reasonable suspicion to make contact. Furthermore, the marijuana that was discovered as a result of my client's statement to Officer Adams at the time is separated, and I believe the term of art they use in the case law is antenated from the alleged reason to make contact in the first place. And we believe that the evidence supports the granting of a motion to suppress. Thank you very much.
Do you have any argument?
Can you say that again, Your Honor?
Did you have any argument?
Oh, yes, Your Honor. So, Your Honor, the officer here approached the defendant while the defendant was stationary on a public roadway. This reads more as a consensual encounter than even anything else. And so the behavior of the defendant while engaging with the officer also suggests this. But continuing to do the analysis under reasonable suspicion standard, Officer Adams' actions in investigating the defendant meets and surpasses the standards that have been set by the court for reasonable suspicion. As we use the reasonable suspicion standard is, the officers are allowed to detain if they have specific articulable facts that when combined lead to a rational inference from those facts that's objective to reasonably conclude that the person being detained has been, or will be engaged in criminal activity. Your Honor, as you saw from the video and the testimony today, he was able to articulate several specific facts that led him to the conclusion that a crime was, or would occur. He approached the defendant based on his observations. He said that he had the suspicious behavior of the passenger exiting the vehicle and heading to the door, but then quickly turning back and getting in the car. The recent theft cases in the local neighborhood, the irrigation equipment haphazardly being in the back of a truck and that truck having temporary tags, and then the status of the house being for sale. These facts, while separately, could be innocent, and the defense mentioned several times that that fact in itself is not up to the standard of reasonable suspicion. The defense is correct that that fact in itself would not rise to the level. But when those facts are combined, it led Officer Adams, and I believe any other reasonable person, to think that the defendant had been, or would soon be engaged in criminal activity. Our case is differentiated from the cases that the defense provided. In Ford v. State, the officer was only able to articulate a single fact that he thought the defendant was following too close to the vehicle in front of him. Our officer has mentioned several more facts than that and is therefore different than Ford v. State. And then in Canales v. State and Davis v. State, each case has a single fact that the court said that fact by itself is not enough to rise to the level of reasonable suspicion. But as I've said in our case, he did not have one fact by themselves. He had several that when he put together in his mind led to him to believe that criminal activity is, or would have been occurring in that spot. Specifically in Davis v. State, there was the group of people in a high crime area. And in that case, the court says specifically, while that alone does not justify a search, that action, when added to others, can easily meet the burden of reasonable suspicion. The last analysis that we have to do today is, did his detention change the behavior of the defendant, or did he maintain the status quo? And as the body cam, I believe, showed and his testimony, his initial approach to the defendant did not disrupt or change what was going on in that instance. It did not disrupt the status quo of the defendant. He was merely inquiring as their purpose to be there at the location. And I believe that the initial detention was justified by that reasonable suspicion, and the facts supporting his pat down have been held by the court that they can develop after the initial approach and detention. And therefore, Your Honor, the state would request that you deny the defense's motion and do not order the evidence suppressed.
Well,
Your Honor,
yeah.
Oh, can I add one other thing that, if the court will allow?
Sure.
I would bring to the court's attention that the Supreme Court is a litany of case law that talks about encounters between citizen and police are incredibly rich in diversity. The wide diversity of police-citizen interactions and every encounter between the two is subject to Fourth Amendment scrutiny. In this case, this wasn't just a consensual encounter. At 50 seconds into the video, he says, "If everything checks out, I will let you go." He was seized without specific reasonable suspicion. And I would just bring that to the court and to differentiate the cases that was provided by the state. These were all traffic offenses that the court that was provided. And we respectfully, once again, ask that the court grant our motion to suppress.
All right. Since he got another last word, if you want one, you can.
No, Your Honor, I won't do a second rebuttal.
All right. Here's the deal. I think that the initial approach, I mean, I think police officers have the right to approach people anytime, anywhere. The person doesn't have to stick around and wait to hear what the officer has to say. But I think that when he went back to the car the second time and asked him to get out of the car, I think at that point you're beyond what is a consensual encounter. At that point, I mean, he has his driver's license, the guy, or had the passenger's driver's license, I guess, but they can't go anywhere without that. So he was detained the whole time. And I don't think there was any reasonable suspicion or anything. They claim there's something about a wrong address. He had his mom on the phone. There's this bunch of stuff going on, but none of it is indication of criminal activity going on. So based on all that, I'm going to grant the motion to suppress. What we'll do is set the case out in about 35 days, give the state time if they want to appeal it, they can. If nothing happens in the next 30 days or so, then it'll be final and case will be dismissed. All right. Good luck. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Your Honor.